When my parents split, Mom took my brother, Dad took my sister, I was left an orphanage. 27 years later, I built a company with 217 employees. They called me non-stop. I invited them to see it. The day my parents divided our family like furniture, I was 7 years old. My mother took my brother Marcus, my father took my sister Diane, and I was left at the gates of Hargrove Children's Home with a backpack that had a broken zipper, a sandwich in a plastic bag, and a note I was told was from my parents but was never allowed to open. I asked the woman who drove me there where my mom was. She said she'd be back soon. She was not back soon. She was not back at all. I stood at those gates for a long time. Long enough that the sandwich got warm in my hand. Long enough that I understood, the way children understand things before they have words for them, that soon was not a real answer. It was just a softer way of saying, never. I was 7 years old, and I already knew how to recognize a lie, dressed up as kindness. That was the first thing losing my family taught me. It was not the last. My name is Caleb Winters. I'm 34 years old. I run a company with 217 employees, offices in 4 cities, and a valuation that would have made the 7-year-old version of me laugh until he couldn't breathe. And 8 months ago, my mother called me for the first time in 22 years. Then my father called, then my brother Marcus, then my sister Diane. 4 calls. 4 people who had left me at a gate with a broken zipper and a warm sandwich. Calling me, one after another, within the same week. I let every single one go to voicemail. Then I called them back. And I invited them all to come see what I had built. What happened when they walked through those doors? I want to tell you. I want to tell you their faces. I want to tell you what was in that note I had carried for 27 years and never opened. But to understand what that moment meant, you have to understand where I started. You have to go back to the gate. My parents' marriage had been failing for years before it finally collapsed. I know this now. I piece it together from memories the way you piece together something broken. Not all the fragments fit, some are missing entirely, but enough remains to see the shape of what it was. My father, Robert Winters, was a construction manager. Tall, quiet. The kind of man who showed love by fixing things. A leaky faucet, a squeaking door, a bicycle chain that had come loose. He would appear in the doorway of a room when something was wrong and stand there, wanting to help, not knowing how. He was not a man built for the kind of repair our family needed. My mother, Patricia, was everything he wasn't. Loud and warm and expansive. The kind of woman who filled every room with noise and color and the smell of whatever she was cooking. She sang while she did dishes. She laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them. When she was happy, she was the best thing in any room she walked into. By the time I was 6, she was not happy very often. Diane was 8. I was the youngest by 14 months. Old enough to sense everything happening in that house. Too young to understand almost any of it. I knew the silences. I knew the particular way my parents stopped talking when one of us walked into a room. I knew the sound of a disagreement being swallowed before it could become a fight. I knew all of it in my body before I knew it in my mind. The divorce started fast once it started. 1 month, they were barely speaking. The next, lawyers. The month after, my father moved into an apartment on the other side of the city, and our house got very quiet in a way that was different from before. Not the silence of something being held back, but the silence of something already gone. I didn't know my mother was making lists. I should have paid more attention. The conversation happened on a Saturday morning in November. I remember it was Saturday because cartoons were on in the other room, and I was irritated at being pulled away from them. I remember it was November because there was a wreath on the front door that my mother had put up early, and the windows had that gray afternoon light that comes with November in Ohio. My parents sat across from me at the kitchen table, together for the first time in months, which should have felt good, which felt instead like standing near something about to snap. My mother spoke first. She said things were going to be different now, that she and my father loved all 3 of us, that sometimes adults had to make hard choices. I nodded. 7 years old, nodding at hard choices. Then she said Marcus was going to live with her. I nodded again. Marcus and my mother had always been close. She called him her right hand, which I had never fully understood but accepted the way children accept the things they don't understand. Then my father said Diane was going to live with him. I looked at Diane across the table. She was looking at her hands. I waited for my name. It didn't come. The silence stretched out and I sat in the middle of it, 7 years old, waiting. And the cartoons played in the other room, and nobody said my name. What about me? I finally said. My parents looked at each other. That look. I have spent 22 years trying to forget it. The way it passed between them. Quick, loaded, guilty. The look of two people who have already had a conversation that the third person in the room was never supposed to know existed. My mother said, "You're going to stay somewhere safe for a while. Just until things settle." I asked where. She said, "A place with lots of other kids. You'll like it." I looked at my father. He was looking at the table. I understood then, in the way children understand things before they have the language for them, that there were no other words coming. That this was the whole sentence. That the rest of it, the explanation, the reason, the part that would make it make sense, that part wasn't coming. 3 days later, a woman I had never met drove me to Hargrove Children's Home and left me at the gate. Broken backpack, warm sandwich, a sealed envelope with my name on the front, and a strip of tape across the flap. She told me it was from my parents. She told me to open it when I was ready. I was not ready for 27 years. Hargrove Children's Home was a large Victorian building on the edge of a small city in Ohio. From the outside, it looked like the kind of place that appeared in old stories. High windows, iron fence, the specific gray of stone that has absorbed decades of weather. Inside, it smelled like industrial cleaner and cafeteria food, and something underneath both that I could never name but recognized immediately as the smell of a place that processed children rather than raised them. 43 kids. When I arrived, ages ranging from infants to 17. The staff were not unkind. I want to be clear about that. There is a version of this story where the institution is cruel and the adults are villains and the child suffers at their hands, and that is not my story. My story is quieter and in some ways harder because of it. My story is about absence rather than cruelty. About what happens when nothing is particularly wrong, except that the people who should be there simply are not. Mrs. Okafor ran the younger children's wing. She was a large, deliberate woman who spoke slowly and meant everything she said and never promised anything she couldn't deliver. She showed me which bunk was mine, which hooks in the bathroom were for my towel, where to sit in the cafeteria on the first day so I wouldn't feel lost. She did not tell me my parents were coming back. I respected her for that more than I can say. The other kids sorted themselves the way kids always do, by age, by temperament, by how long they'd been there and what that had cost them. The long-timers had a specific quality, a flatness in the eyes that wasn't sadness exactly, more like the expression of someone who has stopped expecting something and made peace with the stopping. I recognized it because I was growing it myself. I waited for my parents to come. For the first 6 months, I wrote letters every single week. To my mother, to my father, to Marcus, to Diane. Mrs. Okafor helped me address the envelopes without ever once suggesting I stop. She just helped with the stamps and put them in the outgoing mail and never said a word about it. Some came back unopened. Most didn't come back at all, which was somehow worse. By 9 I had stopped waiting, not dramatically, not on a specific day, more like a door that closed so gradually I didn't notice it was shut until I turned around and couldn't find the handle. I stopped waiting and I started watching. Hargrove had a small library, 3 bookshelves in a room off the main hallway, organized by no system I could identify. Donated books. Picture books beside encyclopedias, beside paperback thrillers, beside, inexplicably, a nearly complete collection of business biographies that I think had come from some estate donation that nobody knew what to do with. I found them at 10, pulled them off the shelves at random. Read every one within a year. Carnegie, Rockefeller. Stories of companies started in garages, in borrowed spaces, in the back rooms of other businesses. The biographies were old, some so old the companies they described no longer existed, but the pattern inside them was the same across all of them, and I could see it clearly by the time I was 11. The people who built things started with nothing, and treated nothing like a foundation, not a ceiling. I wrote that in the back of a notebook Mrs. Okafor gave me for my 11th birthday. I still have that notebook. The first business I built was a school supply store. I was 12. Hargrove gave each child a small weekly allowance. Not much, just enough to teach the habit of managing something. I spent 6 weeks spending nothing. Saved $3.40. Used it to buy a bulk pack of pencils from a dollar store 2 blocks from Hargrove on a supervised weekend outing. I sold them individually to the other kids at 5 cents each. By the end of the month, I had enough for 2 bulk packs. By the end of the year, I had a cardboard box under my bunk holding pencils, erasers, ruled paper, and 2 types of pens. 17 regular customers. A handwritten inventory list updated every Sunday night. Mrs. Okafor found it during bed checks. She stood there, looking at the box for a long time. I braced for her to shut it down. She said, "Do you have a pricing system?" I showed her my list. She studied it. She said, "Your margins on the erasers are too low." Then she handed it back and kept walking. I raised the eraser prices the next morning. By 14, I had expanded into snacks. Candy bars bought in bulk from a wholesale store a staff member had started taking me to once a month. By 15, I had a separate notebook for accounts receivable, a term I had learned from one of the old business biographies, and had looked up 3 times to make sure I understood it correctly. By 16, I had saved enough, through the supply store and weekend odd jobs and 3 years of spending almost nothing, to open a checking account at the bank 2 streets from Hargrove. The teller who helped me was named Dorothy. She walked me through the paperwork. 16 years old, Hargrove issue jacket, coffee can full of carefully counted bills, with the same seriousness she would have given any adult. She did not make me feel small about it. When I left, I had an account number written on a slip of paper that I kept in my front pocket for a week. That account number was the first thing that had ever been entirely mine. Not a bunk assigned to me, not a hook in a bathroom, not a place at a cafeteria table. Mine? The years between 16 and 18 were a particular kind of education that no school teaches. I learned that institutions have rhythms, and that if you understand the rhythm, you can move within it more freely than people expect. I learned that adults respond to competence regardless of age, that if you show up prepared and do what you say you'll do, most people stop seeing how young you are and start seeing what you can do. I learned that resources are almost never as scarce as they appear, that there is almost always a way to get what you need if you are willing to be creative about how you define getting and need. I learned that being left behind does not mean being left without. It means you have to build your own. I aged out of Hargrove at 18. They give you a bag when you leave, a state-issued duffel, toiletries, practical items, a folder of documents, birth certificate, social security card, a resource list for young adults leaving foster care. Mrs. Okafor walked me to the front door. I had grown 8 inches since I arrived. She had to look up at me now, which she seemed to find mildly amusing in a way she would never have admitted. She shook my hand. She said, "You're going to be fine, Caleb. Not because it'll be easy, because you already know it won't be." I said, "Thank you." She nodded and went back inside. I stood at the front door of Hargrove Children's Home with my state-issued duffel and my folder of documents and my bank account with $412 in it. I looked at the iron gate I had walked through 11 years earlier, the gate that had closed behind a 7-year-old with a warm sandwich and a broken zipper. I felt something standing there that I did not have a name for. Not anger, not sadness, something quieter than both. Something that sat in the chest like ballast, heavy, stabilizing, necessary. Okay, I thought, now we start. The first 2 years after Hargrove were the hardest years of my life. I want to say that plainly because there is a version of a story like this one, where the hero leaves the difficult place and immediately begins ascending, where the suffering ends at the gate and the triumph begins in the parking lot. And that version is a lie that does nobody any good. The truth is that I rented a room from a woman named Gloria, who took in former foster kids as an informal ministry. $7 a night, shared bathroom, kitchen access until 9 p.m., a curfew she enforced with the authority of someone who had seen what happened when she didn't. I got a job at a print shop within the first week. The pay was barely enough to cover rent and food if I was careful. I was careful. I enrolled in community college at night. Business administration. I took every class the catalog offered. Finance, operations, marketing, accounting, business law. I was not the best student in any room I sat in. I was the most consistent. I showed up to every class. I sat in the front third of every room. I took notes by hand because writing things down made them stay. I read every assignment twice, once for the information and once for the structure, the way the information was organized, which sometimes told you more than the information itself. The print shop was where I learned something that the business biographies hadn't fully taught me. The distance between a person with an idea and a person who executes an idea is almost entirely made of discomfort. The people who build things are not the people with the best ideas. They are the people who are most willing to be uncomfortable for the longest time. I filed that away. I started my first real business at 21. The brokerage was called Winters Print Solutions, which was not a creative name but was a clear one, and I have always believed that clarity is worth more than creativity in a business name. I ran it from a laptop on Gloria's kitchen table before 9 p.m. The concept was simple. Small businesses needed printed materials. Commercial printers had excess capacity and minimum order requirements that priced small businesses out. I connected the two and took a margin on the difference. My first client was a bakery 3 blocks from the print shop. They needed menus reprinted. The shop's minimum order was too high. I found a printer 2 cities over with leftover press time and brokered the deal. I made $42. I wrote it in my notebook that night, drew a circle around it, sat looking at it for a long time. Then I went looking for the next client. By 22, I had 8 regular clients and had made enough to move out of Gloria's and into a studio apartment with a bed and a desk and a window that faced a parking lot. By 2003, I had 18 clients and had hired my first contractor, a designer named Priya who worked remotely and was better at visual communication than anyone I had ever encountered. By 2004, I had quit the print shop entirely. I want to tell you that moment felt triumphant. It didn't. It felt terrifying. It felt like stepping off a ledge in the dark and not knowing how far down the ground was. I stepped off anyway. That is the only way any of it works. The pivot happened at 25. The brokerage had taught me something I hadn't expected to learn. Small businesses didn't just need print. They needed everything that came with it. Design, branding, a coherent visual identity that could compete with larger competitors. The whole package, affordable, fast, built for businesses that couldn't access agency pricing. I spent 6 months researching, talking to small business owners, asking questions in the particular way I had learned to ask questions. Not what do you need, but what problem keeps you up at night that you haven't been able to solve. Those are different questions, and they get very different answers. What I heard again and again was this: we know we look small. We don't know how to stop looking small. I knew how to solve that. I incorporated Groundwork Creative at 26, with a business partner named Simone Chen, who I had met in an accounting class and who was the most organized human being I had encountered in my life. Simone could look at a system and immediately see where it was inefficient. She could build a process for anything in the time it took most people to understand what a process was. She kept the trains running. I found the clients. Together we were functional in a way that neither of us was alone. We rented office space at 27, not large, not impressive, but real. A sign on the door, a conference table, a coffee machine that worked 3 days out of 5. I stood in that empty office the day we signed the lease, and I thought about Mrs. Okafor, looking at my cardboard box of pencils. Your margins on the erasers are too low. I thought about the gate, the broken zipper, the warm sandwich, the note I had never opened. Then I thought, okay, then I got to work. Growth is not linear, and anyone who tells you it is, has either never built anything or is trying to sell you something. Groundwork went through a year at 28, where we almost didn't survive. A major client pulled their contract without warning. We had overhired on the assumption of continued growth. And for 4 months, I paid staff before I paid myself, and some months didn't pay myself at all. I ate rice and eggs, and whatever was marked down at the grocery store near the office, and I did not tell Simone how close we were to the edge, because Simone had 2 kids and a mortgage, and knowing the edge was that close would not have helped either of us. We survived it, barely, and survival, I have learned, is its own form of education. You learn things in the barely surviving that you cannot learn any other way. You learn what the company actually is when everything optional has been stripped away. You learn which clients are real and which are fair weather. You learn which employees stay when the water gets cold and which ones head for shore. You learn what you are made of in a way that good years simply cannot teach you. By 30 we had recovered and were growing again, faster than before, because the hard year had forced us to rebuild on a foundation that was stronger than what we had started with. By 31, we had 60 employees. By 32, 217. Offices in Chicago, Columbus, Atlanta, and Denver. A client list that included 3 national brands, and a regional reputation that had started crossing into national territory. By 33, a private equity firm called us. The number they put on the table was the kind of number that changes the sound of a room when it's said out loud. We didn't sell, but the offer was reported in an industry publication, then picked up by 2 others, then by a business news outlet that had a significant online following. And that article, in that outlet, on that particular Thursday in September, was how my mother found out her son was alive and had built something. She called on a Tuesday. I was in a strategy meeting when the notification came through. My assistant slipped me a handwritten note, the way she does when something can't wait. Call from a Patricia Winters. Says, she's your mother. I read it twice, set it face down on the conference table, finished the meeting. Then I sat in my office with the door closed for 45 minutes, and I did not do anything at all, which is something I almost never do. I had thought about this call across so many years that thinking about it had become a kind of texture in the background of my life. Not a sharp thing anymore, not an open wound, just something present, like weather. I had imagined it at 9 in my bunk at Hargrove, running the conversation in my head the way kids do when they need a story to survive something. I had imagined it at 15, at 18 at the gate, at 22 in the studio apartment facing the parking lot. Somewhere around 25, I had mostly stopped imagining it. And now here it was. Not imagined, actual, a notification on my phone. A name delivered on a post-it note. She called again the next day. Then my father called. Thursday, Marcus. On Friday, Diane. On Saturday morning. 4 calls. 1 week. 22 years of silence, and then suddenly all 4 of them, one after another, like a dam that had held for decades and then gone all at once. I listened to the voicemails alone, in order, in my office with the door closed and the city visible through the east window. My mother's voice was the same. That was the thing I was not prepared for. The same warmth, the same particular music of it, the same cadence I had heard in my head for 22 years when I tried to remember what she sounded like. And hearing it, the actual thing, not the memory of it, did something to me I didn't have a clean name for. Not softening, not breaking, something more complicated, like pressing on something that has healed but still remembers everything. She said she had seen the article. She said she was so proud. She said she had thought about me every single day. She said she wanted to explain. She said she was sorry. She said it twice, which told me she knew once wasn't enough, and was not sure twice was either. My father's message was shorter, measured. He said he'd read about the company, said he always knew I had it in me, which I noticed was a thing people say when they want credit for a belief they never acted on. He said he hoped I was well. He said he'd like to talk. He said nothing about the gate. Marcus talked too fast, filled the silence with words the way people do when they are not sure they deserve the call to be answered. He said he'd looked for me online for years, said he hadn't known how to reach out, said he was proud of me, said he missed me, which was strange because we had only known each other as children, and you cannot really miss someone you never had the chance to know. Diane cried on the voicemail. She didn't say much, just that she was sorry, just that she hoped I'd call back, just that she'd thought about me. I sat with all 4 messages for 3 days. Then I called them back, not individually, together. One conference call, all 4 at once. The silence, when I said I've got all 4 of you on the line, told me everything I needed to know about what they'd been expecting. I told them I'd heard their messages. I told them I was well. I told them that if they wanted to understand what I had built, they should come see it. In person, with their own eyes. I gave them a date. I gave them the address. I told them to be there at 10 in the morning. Then I said goodbye and ended the call. The 2 weeks between that call and their arrival were among the strangest of my life. Not because I was nervous. I want to be clear about that. I had stood in rooms with investors who controlled more capital than most countries, and I had not been nervous. I had sat across tables from clients who could have ended us with a signature, and I had not been nervous. Nervous was not what I felt. What I felt was something older than nervous. Something that lived below the professional surface in a place I had not visited in a long time. Something that 7-year-olds feel when they are waiting at gates, and grown men feel when the gates reappear in different forms. I did not change anything about the office that matters. I did not redecorate or rearrange or make anything larger or more impressive than it already was. The impulse was there. I noticed it and named it and put it down. Because the point was not to impress them. The point was for them to see the truth of what existed. And the truth did not need staging. But I did do one thing. I found the note. The envelope had lived in the bottom of a box for the better part of 2 decades. Through 11 years at Hargrove, and 16 years after, through 7 apartments, 2 offices, 3 cities. I had moved it the way you move something you cannot throw away and cannot face. Carefully, without opening, placing it in whatever new box represented the bottom of whatever new life had begun. It was in a banker's box in my office closet, underneath old tax documents and the original Groundwork Creative Incorporation papers and a notebook from 1997 that I had kept because Mrs. Okafor had given it to me. I found it on a Wednesday night, alone in the office after everyone else had gone home, going through the box with the specific focused calm of someone doing something they have been not doing for 27 years. The envelope was yellowed at the edges. The tape across the flap had dried and cracked. My name on the front was in my mother's handwriting, the same looping letters from birthday cards I had received before everything stopped. For Caleb. Open when you're ready. I held it for a long time. Then I put it on my desk. Not to open, not yet. Just to stop carrying it in the box. They arrived on a Friday morning in April. I watched them on the lobby security camera feed from my office. I had told my assistant I wanted a few minutes before they were brought up. My mother came through the doors first. 63 years old. Still the same walk. Quick, purposeful, the walk of a woman who has always known where she is going. She had gone gray, which I had not imagined in any of my versions of this moment. She stopped just inside the doors and looked around the lobby. At the reception desk, at the Groundwork Creative logo on the wall, at the staff directory, near the elevator, at the space itself. And her face did something I could not fully read from the camera feed but recognized somewhere below my understanding. My father came in behind her. Taller than I had remembered. Or maybe I had just been so small the last time I saw him that my memory had scaled him down. He moved the way he always had, slowly, deliberately, with the careful tread of a man who measures where he puts his weight. He looked at the logo. He looked at the reception desk. He put his hand on the back of a chair near the entrance and held it there for a moment, steadying himself on something solid, and then let go. Marcus came in third, 37 years old. He looked like my father, in a way that hit me somewhere I was not prepared for. The same jaw, the same way of holding his shoulders. He was looking everywhere at once, absorbing the space, and I watched him reach the staff directory near the elevator and scan it and stop when he found my name. Caleb Winters. Founder and CEO. He stood there reading it for longer than it takes to read 5 words. Diane came last. She was crying before she cleared the doors. Not loudly, silently, the way people cry when they are trying not to, and failing. She had my mother's eyes, and something of my father's stillness, and she stood just inside the entrance with one hand over her mouth, and looked at the lobby and kept crying without making a sound. I gave them 5 minutes. Then I went down to meet them. The elevator opened, and there they were. 4 people, same blood, 22 years of silence between us, and a lobby full of morning light. My mother made a sound when she saw me, not a word, something below words. And she started toward me, and I held up one hand. Not harshly, just clearly, not yet, I said. Let me show you something first. And I took them through the office, all of it. Every floor, every department. I walked them through it the way I walked new clients through it, with the specific purpose of showing them not what it looked like, but how it worked. What happened here, and why? what these people were building and what it took to build it. I introduced them to Simone, who shook each hand with the same efficient warmth she brought to everything, and who looked at me afterward with an expression that asked nothing and offered everything. I showed them the creative floor, 40 people at long tables covered in screens and sketches, and the productive mess of people in the middle of making things. I showed them the operations center. I showed them the conference rooms named after cities. I showed them the client wall, a long gallery of logos representing every company that had trusted us to make them look like themselves better, and I showed them the hallway outside the main conference room where we had mounted, framed, two things that mattered: the first dollar the brokerage ever made, a single worn bill in a simple frame, the $42 from the bakery with the menus, broken into its first bill, because you have to start somewhere, and starting somewhere deserves to be remembered, and next to it, the glass trophy from the Regional Business Award, my name on it. Caleb Winters, Groundwork Creative, founder. My father stood in front of that frame for a long time. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I saved my office for last. It is not a large room. I have never cared about the size of rooms. What matters is what happens in them. A desk, 2 chairs across from it, a shelf with the trophy's twin, and a row of the business biographies from Hargrove that I had eventually tracked down and bought as an adult, because I had wanted to own the books that had taught me the most important things I knew. A window facing east that fills with good light every morning, and on the desk, when we walked in, the envelope. I let them file in. I stood behind the desk. I let them settle, my mother and father in the 2 chairs, Marcus and Diane standing to either side. And when the room was quiet, I picked up the envelope. I held it up. My mother saw it immediately. I watched her face change. "Do you know what this is?" I said. She looked at it and pressed her lips together, and nodded very slightly. My father looked at it, and then looked at the floor. "This came with me to Hargrove," I said, November 14th, 1999. It was in the front pocket of my backpack. I have carried it for 27 years. Through 11 years at Hargrove, through 7 apartments, through 2 offices, I have moved it from box to box to box. The room was completely quiet. "I have never opened it," I said. "In 27 years I have never opened it." My mother said my name. Her voice broke on the first syllable. "I want to open it now," I said. "In front of you, because whatever is in here belongs to all of us." Nobody spoke. I opened the envelope. The note was written on a piece of lined paper, folded 3 times, the way you fold something you've refolded several times looking for the right version of it. The handwriting was my mother's. The same looping letters, slightly less steady than I remembered. The letters of someone writing something that cost them something to write. I read it silently first. The room waited. Then I read it out loud. "Caleb, we don't know how to explain this in a way that will make sense to you now. Maybe it never will. We are not able to take care of all 3 of you the way you deserve. This is our failure, not yours. It has never been yours. You are 7 years old, and you are the bravest person we know, and we are sorry that we are asking you to be brave one more time. We love you. We will find a way back to you. We promise. Mom and Dad." I folded the note. I set it on the desk. I looked at my mother and my father and my brother and my sister, and I let the silence sit, and I did not fill it, and nobody else tried to, and that silence held everything that needed to be said for a moment before any of us found the words for it. Then I said, "You didn't find a way back." My mother said, "I know." My father said, "I know." I waited, I said, for a long time. I wrote letters every week for 6 months. I waited at Hargrove for 11 years, and then I stopped waiting, and I built this instead. I let that land. "I'm not telling you that to hurt you," I said. "I'm telling you because you asked to see what I built, and you need to understand what it was built from. It was built from that gate, from that backpack, from that note that said you'd find your way back, and from the 11 years of understanding that you hadn't." My father's jaw was tight. My mother was crying silently. Marcus was looking at the floor. Diane had stopped crying and was looking at me with the expression of someone trying to hear every word clearly. "That's not the whole story," I said. "The gate didn't make me. Mrs. Okafor made me. A box of pencils made me. A shelf of old business biographies made me. A woman named Dorothy, at a bank branch, made me. Gloria and her kitchen table made me. A partner named Simone made me. 217 people down the hall made me. The gate was just the beginning. But it was the beginning, and I needed you to see that. My mother put her face in her hands. My father cleared his throat. He said, "Caleb." Then he stopped. He tried again. "There isn't an explanation that makes it right. I've known that for 22 years. I'm not going to insult you by offering you one." I looked at him for a long moment. "That's the right thing to say," I said. He nodded. "Once. Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. His voice was careful, like he wasn't sure he had the right to speak. "Yes," I said. "Did you hate us?" The room got very still. I thought about it. Not performing the thinking, actually considering it, going back to the place where the honest answer lived. "I was angry for a long time," I said. "At 7, 8, 9. I was angry the way children are angry when they don't have the words for it, which means I was angry in my sleep and in my body, and in the way I couldn't concentrate sometimes, and in the way I picked fights with kids who hadn't done anything to me. At 10, 11, 12. It went quieter. Anger takes energy, and I needed my energy for other things. By 14, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just determined. That's the best word I have. Determined. "Did you hate us?" Marcus said again, softer, like the question was really, "Did you hate me?" "No," I said. "I missed you." "That's different." He looked at the floor again. His shoulders dropped the way someone's shoulders drop when they have been holding something up for a very long time and have finally been told they can put it down. Diane spoke for the first time. She said, "I used to pretend you were at a special school." The room shifted. When people asked me if I had siblings, she said, "I'd say I had 2 brothers, Marcus, and then Caleb, who was at a special school for really smart kids." I made it specific. I said you were in a program for gifted students. I said it was very competitive, that not everyone got in. She paused. "I don't know why I'm telling you that," she said. "Because it's true," I said, "and you've been carrying it." "I was 8 years old," she said. "I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew you were gone, and nobody would tell me where you actually were, and I had to tell people something." "You were 8, I said. "You don't owe me anything for that." "I owe you 27 years of the truth," she said. "Then here's the truth I'd like in return," I said. "Did you know? Did either of you know what was going to happen?" Diane shook her head immediately. "Not until after. Dad told me after. I cried for a week." I looked at Marcus. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I knew something was happening. Mom was different the week before. Distracted. She kept looking at me like she was memorizing something. I didn't know what it meant until after. "And after?" "After," Marcus said. "I asked her where you were. She said you were somewhere safe. I asked if I could write to you. She said, 'Not yet.' I asked again a month later. She said it was complicated. I stopped asking. He looked at me. I shouldn't have stopped asking, he said. No, I agreed. You shouldn't have. I was 10, he said. I know, I said. 10-year-olds shouldn't have to fight for their brothers. That's the part that's not on you. The room was quiet for a long time after that. My mother spoke last. She had been sitting with her hands folded in her lap since I read the note. Not crying anymore. Just very still in the particular way of someone who has arrived somewhere they have been heading for a long time. She said, "When we made the decision, your father and I, it was made from a place of complete failure. That's the only honest word for it. We had failed at the marriage, and we were failing at the separation, and we couldn't figure out how to hold all three of you through both failures at once. And someone, I don't remember who, a lawyer or a counselor or someone, said that temporary placement was an option, that it could give us time to stabilize, that it was meant to be short. A few months?" She stopped. "It wasn't short," I said. "No," she said. "It wasn't, because what happens, what I didn't understand then, and I have spent 22 years understanding, is that temporary becomes permanent the moment you let it. The moment you stop fighting to undo it. And I stopped fighting because fighting meant admitting what I had done, and I wasn't ready to admit it. And every month it was easier to not be ready than the month before, until 22 years had passed and my son was in a newspaper. The room was very quiet. "I am not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I don't think I have the right to ask that. I'm just telling you the truth of it because you deserve the truth. You deserved it 22 years ago, and I owe you at least that now." I looked at her for a long time. Then I said, "I believe you." She looked up. "I believe that it started as something you told yourself was temporary," I said. "I believe that every year made it harder. I believe that you thought about me. I believe all of it." "But," she said. "No but," I said. "All of that is true, and the gate is also true. Both things exist. I'm 34 years old and I have learned that true things don't have to cancel each other out. You can love someone and leave them at a gate. You can think about someone every day and not come back. Both of those things can be real at the same time. I'm not interested in deciding which one is more real. I'm interested in what comes next." My mother looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before and did not have a name for. Something that held grief and relief and something else, something I can only describe as the look of a woman seeing clearly for the first time, something she had been half looking at for decades. "What comes next?" she said. "I don't know yet," I said. "I don't know what we are to each other. I don't know if we can build something. I'm not going to promise that we can, because promises made at gates have a particular history in this family. That landed, nobody flinched from it. What I can offer," I said, "is a willingness to find out, to show up and see what's there. That's what I have right now, a willingness." My mother reached across the desk. She put her hand over mine. I looked at her hand on mine. Then I turned my hand over and held hers. We sat in that office for 3 hours. 3 hours of the kind of conversation that doesn't follow a script, because nothing in life has prepared any of the people in the room for exactly this. Starts and stops. Long silences that weren't empty. Questions asked and answered, and then asked differently, because the first answer hadn't quite reached the place the question was really asking about. Marcus told me about his life, the particular texture of being the one who was chosen, the guilt that had threaded through everything since. He said he had been to therapy for 3 years in his late 20s, specifically to work through what had happened. He said his therapist had asked him once what he would say to me if he could. "What did you say?" I asked. "That I was sorry I didn't fight harder," he said. "That I was 10, and I didn't know how to fight, and I'm sorry I didn't figure it out faster." "It took me until I was 12, I said, "to figure out how to fight." "You were 10. You get more credit than you're giving yourself." He shook his head. "Let me give it to you," I said. "It's mine to give." He nodded. His eyes were wet. Diane told me about the pretend school, more of it, how she had kept the story going through high school, telling people about her brother at the special program, adding detail over the years, making me more real in the version she told because the reality of not knowing was too large to carry in public. She said she had known somewhere that it was wrong, that it was a kind of erasure masquerading as protection. "It wasn't erasure," I said. "You were keeping me alive somewhere. That's different." She looked at me like I had said something she needed and hadn't known she was waiting to hear. My father said very little, and what he said was precise. He said he had made a choice he couldn't defend. He said he had known in November of 1999 that it was wrong, and had done it anyway, because he didn't know what else to do, and didn't have the character yet to figure it out. He said he had built that character in the years after, painfully, slowly, too late, and that the building of it had been one long reckoning with that November morning. He said, "I'm not asking you to call me Dad. I don't think I've earned that. I don't know if I ever will. I just want you to know that I know what I did, and I know what it cost you, and I'm standing here telling you that so you don't have to wonder if I've understood." That was the most my father said in the 3 hours we sat together. It was also the most important thing anyone said. They left at 1 in the afternoon. I walked them to the lobby, to the front doors, past the staff directory where Marcus had stopped and read my name, past the reception desk, to the glass doors and the street beyond. At the door, my mother hugged me. I had not been hugged by my mother since I was 7 years old. And for a moment, just a moment, less than a breath, I was 7 again. Small. Standing at a gate, waiting for someone who had said soon, and meant never, holding a warm sandwich with a broken zipper on my back, and a note I didn't know I'd carry for 27 years. Then I was 34. Founder of a company, 217 employees, 4 cities, a window in my office that faced east and filled with light every morning. I hugged my mother back. My father shook my hand and held it a moment longer than a handshake, the way men do when they have run out of other ways to say something important. I held it back. Marcus hugged me and said something into my shoulder that I didn't catch. And I said I know because whatever it was, I knew. Diane held on longer than the others. She said, "I'm so glad you're okay," and I said, "Me too," and I meant it all the way down. Then they left. I stood at the glass doors and watched them cross the parking lot. Watched them reach their cars. They had come in 2 separate cars, my parents together, Marcus and Diane together, which told me everything about the arrangements that had been made. Watched the cars pull out, watched them drive away, and I stood there until they were gone. I went back upstairs. I sat at my desk. I picked up the note. "You are 7 years old, and you are the bravest person we know." I read it one more time. Then, I folded it along its old creases, placed it back in the yellowed envelope, and put it in my desk drawer, which I closed gently, the way you close something that has waited long enough and deserves to rest, not because I was done with it, not because everything was resolved and clean and tied off at the ends. Real things don't work that way. Real things are ongoing and messy, and they don't arrive at neat endings because they don't end, they just change shape and continue. But because some things can live in a drawer now. Some things don't have to be carried in the bottom of a box anymore. Simone knocked 30 minutes later. Reports. A decision that needed making. A client call at 3. "Ready?" she said. I looked at the desk, at the drawer, at the east window full of afternoon light, at the shelf with the old biographies from Hargrove, the ones that had taught me the most important thing I ever learned. The people who built things started with nothing and treated nothing like a foundation, not a ceiling. "Yeah," I said. "Ready." She sat down across from me and opened the folder, and we got back to work. That is the part nobody imagines when they picture the reunion. The comeback. The moment of reckoning. They picture it as an ending. The music swelling. The frame freezing. The credits rolling. It isn't an ending. It's a Wednesday. It's reports, and a client call, and a decision that needs making, and 217 people down the hall who are counting on someone to show up and keep building. It's just one day, in a life that started at a gate, with a broken zipper, and a note that said, "We will find our way back from people who didn't," until their son built something large enough that they could find their way to it instead. I am not angry about that anymore. I am not sure I have room for anger anymore. What I built took everything I had, and what I have now, the office, the company, the east window, the drawer with the note in it, the phone numbers I didn't have last year and have now, fills the space where the anger used to live. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to work with. And I have always known how to work with enough. The calls started coming regularly after that. Not every day. Not in the frantic, overcompensating way of people trying to make up for lost time all at once, which would have felt false and exhausting. More like the careful, deliberate way of people who have been given a second chance and are terrified of wasting it by moving too fast. My mother called on Sundays, always around 7 in the evening, which I eventually realized was because Sunday evenings had been family time when we were children. Dinner together, the week ahead, the particular warmth of a house that was still a house before everything stopped being one. She was reaching back to a rhythm she remembered. I did not tell her I had noticed. I just started making sure I was available on Sunday evenings. We talked about small things at first. Safe things. The weather in her city, what she was reading, a show she had started watching. I told her about The Office. A client win, a hire we were proud of. Something Simone had said that was so precisely efficient, it had made the entire team laugh. We built the conversation the way you build anything. Slowly, from the ground up, one small piece at a time. My father sent emails. That surprised me more than anything. I had not thought of Robert Winters as an email writer. But the emails came every 10 days or so, and they were like him. Careful, measured, specific. He asked real questions. Not how are you, but you mentioned the Denver office is expanding. What drove that decision? And I read that the industry is shifting toward integrated branding. How is groundwork positioning for that? He was asking about the work because the work was the part of me he could reach most easily. And I respected him enough for knowing his own limitations that I answered every one. Diane texted, often, short messages, images, things she thought I might find interesting or funny. A picture of a dog she had seen on her walk. An article about a business trend. A meme that she apologized for immediately after sending, because she wasn't sure if I was a meme person. I told her I was a meme person. She sent 3 more within the hour. Marcus was the one I didn't hear from for 3 weeks after the office visit. I noticed the absence, not with worry exactly, more with the particular attention you give to something that is conspicuously quiet. And then on a Thursday night my phone rang, and it was him. And he said, I want to get lunch. Just the 2 of us. If that's something you'd want. I said yes. We met at a restaurant in the middle, geographically between his city and mine, which told me he had thought about the logistics and wanted things to be equal. A good sign. A sign of someone who was thinking about fairness rather than convenience. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, coffee in front of him, turning his phone over and over in his hand the way people do when they are nervous and want something to do with their fingers. I sat down across from him. He looked like my father and nothing like my father at the same time. Up close, without the camera feed, without the lobby and the formal weight of the office visit, he just looked like a man at a table, 47 years old. A few lines around his eyes, a way of sitting that was careful, contained, like someone who had learned to take up exactly as much space as he needed, and no more. We ordered. We talked about the drive. We talked about the restaurant. It was good, both of us admitted. Better than either of us had expected from the outside. Small talk. Safe talk. The scaffolding you put up before you start on the real structure. Then Marcus set his coffee down and said, Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? I said yes. He said, The night before they took you to Hargrove, I knew. The restaurant kept moving around us. Plates. Voices. Someone laughing 2 tables over. Mom told me that night, he said. She came into my room after you were asleep, and she told me. She said it was temporary. She said you'd be back soon. She said I couldn't tell you because it would upset you. He looked at his hands. I didn't sleep that night, he said. I lay in my bed, and I listened to the house, and I knew what was happening, and I didn't do anything. I was 10 years old, and I didn't know what to do, and in the morning I watched you eat breakfast, and I didn't say a word. The restaurant noise felt very far away. You were 10, I said. I keep saying that, he said, like it's an answer. But I was 10, and I knew, and I watched you eat breakfast, and I said nothing. And then a woman I'd never seen before came to the door, and I watched you pick up your backpack, and I still said nothing. What would you have said? I asked. He looked up. I don't know, he said. That's what kills me. I don't know what I would have said, but I know I should have said something. Even if it was just, I know. Even if it was just, I'm sorry. Even if it was just your name. I sat with that for a moment. Marcus, I said. He looked at me. I'm saying it now, I said. 27 years late. But I'm saying it. Something in his face broke open and then closed again, quickly, the way men close things quickly in public. But I saw it. I saw what was underneath. And I understood that he had been carrying that Thursday night breakfast for 27 years, the way I had been carrying the gate. And that the weight of watching without speaking had bent him in ways that were different from my bending but no less real. We sat in that restaurant for 3 hours. We talked about his life and mine. The parallel tracks we had been on without knowing it. He had gone into business too, smaller scale, a logistics company he ran with a partner in Columbus. We had both, independently, ended up in business. We had both, independently, learned to build things, because building was the only response to falling apart that made sense to us. We talked about our parents, not bitterly, not in the way of grievance, but in the way of 2 adults trying to understand the people who had made them and unmade them in the same motion. We talked about the future, carefully, without promises that couldn't be kept. When we left, he hugged me on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. Not the formal brief hug of the office visit. A real one. The kind that lasts long enough to mean something. Same time next month? He said. Yeah, I said. Same time next month. We have not missed a month since. The Hargrove visit was Diane's idea. She brought it up on a Sunday call, not my mother's call, a separate one, which we had started having on Wednesday evenings. She said she had been thinking about the places that had made me, about the fact that she had spent 27 years imagining a fictional school and knew nothing about the real place. She said, "Would you ever go back? Would you take me?" I had thought about going back. In the abstract, the way you think about things you're not sure you're ready for. I had driven past the neighborhood once, 3 years ago, on a business trip to Columbus, had turned down a street that I knew would bring me close, and then turned down another, and then stopped and sat in my car 2 blocks away looking at a street sign for a long time before driving away. I wasn't ready then. Yes, I told Diane. I'll take you. We drove up on a Saturday in October. Diane and I, just the 2 of us, in my car with coffee and the radio and the particular silence of 2 people who are comfortable enough not to fill every moment with sound. The building looked smaller than I remembered. That always happens, I'm told. The places that were enormous in childhood reveal their actual dimensions when you return as an adult. But the iron fence was the same, the high windows were the same, the gray stone was the same particular gray I had spent 11 years looking at, and had never quite been able to describe to anyone. I sat in the parked car for a moment. Diane didn't say anything. She just sat beside me, coffee in both hands, waiting. Okay, I said. We went in. Hargrove had changed. Of course it had. 22 years is a long time for anything to stay exactly as it was. The lobby had been repainted, a warmer color than I remembered. The reception desk was new. The smell was different. Less industrial cleaner, more of something I couldn't identify, but that was somehow less institutional, more human. I told the woman at the front desk who I was, that I had been a resident from 1999 to 2007, that I wanted to see the building if possible, and that I was looking for someone, a staff member from that period, a woman named Mrs. Okafor who had run the younger children's wing. The woman at the desk looked up. She said, "Mrs. Okafor retired 4 years ago. But she still volunteers here on Thursday mornings." I looked at Diane. "Is today Thursday?" I said. "It's Saturday," she said. I turned back to the desk. I asked if they had contact information for Mrs. Okafor, if they thought she would be willing to meet with a former resident. The woman at the desk smiled. She said, "Mrs. Okafor talks about the kids she worked with all the time. I think she'd like that very much." She called me 2 days later. Her voice was the same. Slower, perhaps. She was in her late 70s now. But the same deliberate quality, the same sense of a woman who measured her words because she meant all of them. She said, "Caleb Winters, I wondered if I'd ever hear from you." I said, "I should have called sooner." She said, "You called when you were ready. That's the right time." We arranged to meet the following Thursday at a coffee shop near Hargrove. Her suggestion, neutral ground, easy for her to reach. I drove up alone this time. Some things needed to happen without witnesses. She was already there when I arrived. Smaller than I remembered. I had been a child last time, looking up at her, and now I was 6'1" looking across a coffee shop at a woman in her late 70s in a yellow cardigan, white hair cut close, the same steady eyes I had known since I was 7 years old. I sat down across from her. She looked at me for a long moment. "You look like yourself," she finally said. "I mean that as the highest compliment." "I'll take it," I said. We ordered, and then I told her. All of it. The supply store. The bank account. Gloria's kitchen table. The brokerage. Groundwork. The article. The phone calls. The office visit. The note. She listened the way she always had. Completely, without interruption. Without the kind of reactions people perform when they want you to know they're listening. She just listened. And when I finished, she sat with it for a moment, and then she said, "Tell me about the note." I told her what it said. She nodded slowly. "I knew about the note," she said. "The woman who brought you to us told me there was an envelope. That it was from your parents. That you weren't to open it until you were ready. Did you know what was in it?" "No," she said. "But I knew you weren't ready for a long time, and I respected that." Why didn't you push me? Because some things, she said, cannot be pushed. Some things have to be carried until the carrying itself tells you it's time to put them down. Pushing would have been for my comfort, not yours. I sat with that. Mrs. Okafor, I said, I need to ask you something. Ask, she said. Did you know? When I was there, the letters I sent every week, the ones that mostly didn't come back, did you know they weren't reaching anyone? She looked at me for a long moment. I suspected, she said. After the first several months with no reply, I suspected, but I had no confirmation, and more importantly, the writing was helping you, not because it was reaching them, because it was reaching something in yourself. You were 7 years old working through something that would have flattened many adults. The writing was how you did it. Taking that away would have taken away your only tool. So you let me keep sending letters you thought were going nowhere. I let you keep sending letters that were going somewhere, she said. They were going to the person you were becoming. Every week, faithfully. I looked at this woman across a coffee shop table. This woman who had shown me where to put my backpack and which hooks were for my towel, and who had looked at a cardboard box of pencils and said your margins on the erasers are too low. This woman who had walked me to a door at 18 and told me I was going to be fine, not because it would be easy, but because I already knew it wouldn't be. You knew, I said, didn't you? That I was going to be okay. I knew you were going to be something, she said. I didn't know what, but I knew the particular kind of child you were, the kind who watches everything, who thinks before they speak, who treats difficulty like information rather than verdict. Those children become things. I didn't know what kind of thing. I'm very glad it's this kind. I reached into my jacket pocket. I put an envelope on the table between us. She looked at it. Hargrove has a capital campaign, I said, for a new library wing. I read about it on the website. She looked at the envelope without touching it. Caleb, she said. The library made me, I said. Those 3 bookshelves and those old business biographies made me. I want the next kid, the next 7-year-old who gets left at that gate. I want them to have more than 3 shelves. She looked at the envelope for a long time. Then she picked it up. She did not open it. She held it in both hands and looked at it with the expression of someone holding something that means more than its contents. Thank you, she said. No, I said. Thank you. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. The same gesture my mother had made in my office, the same placement, different hands, different history, different weight. Your margins on the erasers, she said. I laughed. Really laughed. The kind that comes from somewhere genuine and unexpected, were too low, I finished. They were, she said. And she smiled. And in that smile was 11 years of Sunday evenings, and outgoing mail, and a cardboard box under a bunk, and a door walked to at 18. And all of it was there in the smile of a woman in a yellow cardigan in a coffee shop near a Victorian building with an iron fence. We sat there for 2 hours. When we left, she hugged me on the sidewalk and I held on, and neither of us said anything because there was nothing left to say that the holding didn't already say better. The conversation with my mother happened 6 months after the office visit. Not the Sunday calls. Those had become steady, comfortable. The kind of regular contact that rebuilds itself slowly into something that resembles a relationship. Something new, different from what we had before. Built on what actually was, rather than what should have been. Not the same as having a mother for 34 years. But something real. The conversation I am talking about happened on a Saturday in February when my mother drove to my city, alone, without my father, without Marcus or Diane, and met me for dinner at a restaurant I had chosen, somewhere quiet. Somewhere we could talk without effort. She looked better than she had in the office, less braced, less like a woman arriving at a reckoning, and more like a woman who had already reckoned, and was learning to live on the other side of it. We ate, we talked, and then, after the plates were cleared and the coffee was on the table, she said, "Can I tell you why?" I looked at her. "The real reason," she said, "not the explanation I've told myself for 22 years. The actual truth underneath it." "Yes," I said. She was quiet for a moment, arranging something. "When your father and I split," she said, "I was falling apart. Completely. In a way that I had never fallen apart before, and have never fallen apart since. I could barely function. I could barely get out of bed. I was 36 years old, and everything I thought my life was going to be had collapsed, and I was drowning. She held her coffee cup in both hands. Marcus needed me, she said. He was 10, and he needed me, and I needed him to need me. Having him there, having someone to take care of, was the only thing keeping me vertical. Do you understand what I mean? Yes, I said. I could not take care of 3 children while I was falling apart, she said. I genuinely could not. That is not an excuse. I know it is not an excuse, but it is the truth. And when the option of temporary placement was offered, I took it, because I told myself that a few months of stability, for me, for Marcus, for our small broken unit of 2, would let me get back on my feet, and then I would come back for you. She looked at me. But the thing about falling apart, she said, is that putting yourself back together takes longer than you think, and every month that passed, coming back for you meant admitting what I had done. And admitting what I had done meant facing something I was not strong enough to face. So I didn't. And then another month passed. And then another. And then 11 years, I said. And then 11 years, she said. She set down the coffee cup. I want you to know that I understand there is no version of this that is okay, she said. I am not telling you this so you will understand and forgive me. I am telling you because you asked for the truth, and the truth is that I was weak, and that my weakness cost you something that can't be given back, and that I have known that for 22 years, and knowing it has not stopped being the hardest thing I carry. I sat with all of it, with the woman across from me who was 63 years old, and still, after all this time, carrying November 14, 1999, like a stone she had agreed never to put down. I thought about the gate, the sandwich, the note. I thought about Hargrove and the 3 bookshelves, and Mrs. Okafor's yellow cardigan, and the coffee can of bills on Dorothy's counter, and Gloria's kitchen table before 9 p.m. I thought about the erasers, and their margins, about Simone opening a folder, about 217 people down the hall building things. Mom, I said. She looked up. It was the first time I had called her that since I was 7 years old. I saw it land, saw what it did to her face, the way it moved through her, the way her eyes changed. I'm not going to tell you it's okay, I said. What happened is not okay. It will never be okay. Okay is not available here. She nodded. But here is what I know, I said. I know that you were 36, and drowning. I know that drowning people make decisions that dry people never would. I know that what feels like abandonment from the outside can feel like survival from the inside. I know this not because I am excusing you, I'm not, but because I have spent 34 years learning how people work, including myself, and I know that humans are capable of doing terrible things from broken places without being terrible people. My mother was crying. Quietly, not looking away. I also know, I said, that the gate made me. I know that sounds like something I'm supposed to say, like a silver lining people attached to hard things to make the hard things bearable, but I mean it as a fact. The gate made me, not because it should have happened, because it did happen, and I chose what to do with it. And what I chose to do with it is the company and the people and the window and the life I have. And I would not trade that life. Not for the version where none of it happened. Not for anything. She put her hand over her mouth. So here is what I'm offering you, I said. Not forgiveness. I don't think forgiveness is a door I can open or close for you. I think it's something that happens or doesn't on its own terms and timeline. What I'm offering is presence. A Sunday call. A dinner twice a year. A relationship that is not what it should have been because what it should have been is gone. But something real, something true, built from what actually is. Is that enough? She said. She meant, is it enough for you? It's what there is, I said. And I have always known how to work with what there is.